Please allow me to thank the members of the press for appearing on what I consider very short notice. But I also know that it is absolutely necessary for us to address the issues emanating not only from what has occurred in Buffalo, New York, but also emanating from many other similar circumstances that have manifested themselves around our country. My prayers, my thoughts, my heartfelt condolences are with the families of the entire Buffalo community. But dear friends, as I've said before, prayers and thoughts are not enough. We must do more. And one of the things that we must do as people of goodwill is understand that this young 18-year-old man was not born a criminal. He was not born to hate. Hate is something that he acquired after his birth. And if we're going to deal with the issues affecting us in this country as it relates to hate, we've got to understand the root causes of hate. To understand the root causes of hate, I want to share just a few lines from a song styled, "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught." I believe it makes a point succinctly. It says, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed into your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid and of people whose skin is differently shaded. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you're 6, 7, or 8, to hate the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. This is what is happening to us. Our children are being taught to hate. And when they grow up, they do hateful and spiteful things. My friends, it is no longer enough for people who hold public office to be the loudest voices denouncing acts of violence and mass shootings. It's time for the chambers of commerce, the clergy, business owners, school boards, and people from all walks of life to denounce hate as well. All purveyors of hate must be publicly denounced, yes, by the public. Although hate violence impacts some indirectly, it can impact all of us indirectly. And it impacts some directly as well as others indirectly. Everyone is impacted. Hate crimes and mass shootings impact people's lives as well as the American economy. Because hate crimes and mass shootings impact commerce, the business community has a duty to their consumers and to society to speak out against hate and white supremacy. Friends, I'm here today to remind us that all communities are at risk of hate crimes and mass shootings. The African American community is at risk. 9 people murdered June 18, 2015 at the Charleston, South Carolina church shooting. The Asian community is at risk. 8 people murdered on March 16, 2021 at the Atlanta spa shootings. Jewish community, 11 people murdered on October 27, 2018 at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life synagogue shooting. The Latino community, 22 people murdered on August 1st, 2019 at the El Paso Walmart shooting. The Muslim community is impacted. 2 people murdered on August 13th, 2016 at the New York City mosque shooting. The LGBTQ plus community, 49 people murdered on June 12th, 2020 at the Pulse nightclub shooting. All communities are at risk, and as a result, all communities must respond. It's time for the business community, the chambers of commerce, all segments of the business community to respond and denounce hate and violence. It's time for the clergy to do more. The clergy must not be silent on this issue and must speak with clarity as it denounces hate, and must make sure that it is said not once, not twice, but again and again and again, so that the young people who are being taught to hate will also be taught that hate is something that our society will not tolerate. Those who tolerate hate perpetuate hate. It's got to be a societal response to an issue that impacts all of society. We've all a role to play in eliminating hate. It's no longer just the duty of those who hold public trust. It's everyone's duty, but more specifically, it impacts commerce. And because it impacts commerce, the business community has an outsized role. The business community has to understand that if it does not act, fewer people are going to go out as regular as they could or should. People will start to stay at home. This will impact the revenue that businesses count on to stay in business. This will in turn impact the jobs and people who are employed. This will in turn impact the commerce, because when people lose their jobs, they don't have as much to spend. This is about the American economy, but it's also, most importantly, about American lives being lost to hate. And remember, this young man was not born a murderer. He was not born a person to hate to the extent that he did. It's got to be taught, and we have to teach people that hate has no place in our society. I welcome your questions.
What's next? It's almost kind of sad that it takes one of these tragedies to happen for us to then bring up these conversations. Maybe just speaking to the need to keeping this conversation going and action that needs to be taken so that we're not backtracking every time there's a tragedy.
The business community has got to step up. The next thing that should happen, in my opinion, would be for the Houston Partnership in downtown Houston to hold a meeting and decide that they are going to go on record as being opposed to this violence, this white supremacy that we see in our country all too often. And the business community has to have a program itself to deal with hate. Hate cannot become the province of those who dwell in Washington, D.C. as representatives only. It's got to become everyone's concern, and everyone has to be a part of the solution. But the business community has got to make it known that they will not tolerate hate, because not only does it take lives, it also impacts the flow of revenue. And impacting the flow of revenue means that jobs are going to be impacted. And when jobs are impacted, that means that people will have less to spend. And when that happens, the economy itself can have some adverse effects. So we must, friends, do all that we can to make sure that we all play our role. The business community, however, has got to step up. And the clergy cannot allow this to become an event on certain holy days. It has to become an everyday event for the clergy. I don't understand why the clergy itself has not called for a march on Washington, a peaceful demonstration to show that members of the clergy from all faiths are united against hate in this country. If the clergy would unite and make it known, just as Dr. King did when he had his march on Washington, it would make a difference. We've got to ask the clergy to step forward and make its position known as it relates to hate. Remember, this young man was not born a killer. He was taught. It's something that he learned. And we must not allow each generation to learn hate to the extent that we see hate crimes, white supremacy, all of these things taking place in our country. People are taught, and we've got to do what we can to make it known that this is unacceptable behavior. School boards have to speak out. They've got to focus on the people who are losing their lives at schools. You can't just prosecute individuals. We've got to prosecute the hate itself. And to do that, to prosecute the hate, we've got to make sure everybody's engaged. This is a call to action for everyone. If you're not on a Chamber of Commerce board, then contact your Chamber of Commerce. If you're not a minister, a part of the clergy, then talk to your minister or the person who represents you in the clergy. Talk to them and get them to get involved.
Congressman, just so I can have a better understanding, this is again just digesting information. It stands with the business owners community. That this young man walked into a random grocery store. Are you saying that businesses need to kind of put more of the red light that people that are not for all people are not allowed to come inside? You think they need more security? Maybe just so I can get a better idea of the call on the business community in connection to this.
Well, let me give you the status first of the business community currently. Currently, we're out in a public space. The business community would not want us to have this such that a sign of a given business community would be displayed. That's why we chose this venue. They don't want that. They don't want to be associated with crime. They don't want it to be thought that somehow their business would in some way be complicit with crime. Well, I appreciate this. But what is happening is that there is a certain amount of complicity when you don't stand up, when you don't announce your position. Everybody's got to take a position. And the business community has got to let people know that they will not tolerate hate as well. Just talking about it will mean something to people. Having corporations have business plans that include the elimination of hate. We've got to make sure that the business community speaks out loudly. The Chamber of Commerce, the partnership in Houston, Texas, should make a statement about this. I notice that businesses, too often, they simply are in business to receive revenue, hire people. That's good. But now it's to the point that people who come into places of business are being murdered. Businesses have a responsibility to let the world know where they stand on this issue. This young man was not born a killer. This is something that he learned. And we've got to let society know that we won't tolerate hate. Those who tolerate it, perpetuate it. You've got to be taught. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'll just close with this, friends. I frequent many stores myself, and I have been approached by people who have said to me that they are becoming more frightened about going out for good reasons, just to buy food, clothing, to do the things that will have people acquire the necessities of life. People are concerned and they're afraid. At some point, there will be a break. We need to act before there is a break. So I'm appealing to the clergy. Make your position known. Appealing to the business community. Publish your position on white supremacy. Say that white supremacy is unacceptable. Say it. Some people seem to think that the white supremacists in this country are a part of some sort of clientele that they have to cater to by not denouncing them. White supremacists aren't welcome. I was in a church this morning, and out in front of the church they have a sign that says, "No guns allowed." In my lifetime, I never thought I'd see such things, but they're here. And the church has to step forward by and through the clergy. I thank you, and I hope that people will understand that this is a message intended for people of goodwill to act responsibly. Okay, thank you.